you know, I'm in that kind of trap of wanting to do stuff all the time, but I just have no motivation and I'm just so lazy. And I thought kind of the only way around that was to kind of force myself into something, and something that I couldn't just get myself out of and change. And that's when I decided to make the move, and it was, yeah, solely by myself, and just booked a one-way ticket and came over. So this is where I live. It's Surrey Hills, which is central Sydney. Literally like 2 minutes down there is the CBD. Pretty nice suburb. It's terrace line and all the streets, so it's quite a nice scenery. And right now we are on Batman Lane, which is a pretty cool street. This is my house here, this blue beauty. Some awesome tiny little hallway. Kind of looks like you're going to like a weird dungeon or something. And then this is our tiny little lounge. This is our tiny little kitchen. Tiny little bathroom. As you can see, it's a tiny place. The sound guy here is struggling to get through the door. It's the price you pay to live in Sydney. This area has definitely been one of my favourite areas to live in. It's definitely a lot more kind of rougher around the edges, but there's a lot more going on here than out west.
So this is our house. We live in Dulwich Hill. How far are we from the city? About 45 minutes on a bus, I think.
It's exciting, not having a job, not knowing any people, just knowing that you had a home to go to, and that was it, basically.
We only had like maybe $2,000.
Oh, it wasn't much.
Was not much, and that had to last us 8 weeks over here so that we could get a job. It did not. I had to ask Mum so many times, so she'd just feed me through some money every week until I got a job.
So when I first got here, being a Kiwi, it was obviously just something that was so gigantic. When I went back home the first time, I was walking just around Ponsonby, and I remember saying to someone, "Where is everyone?" And they kind of responded, "This is how it always looks." And then I kind of thought, okay, well, it's probably just because being over there you get used to just people constantly being everywhere. So that was very daunting, and on top of that, not knowing anyone made it quite challenging, and it was very isolating. And I think 6 months into it, I actually made the decision that I would move back home just because it wasn't really working. And then everyone kind of told me, you've got to stick things out for a year. If you move anywhere, stick it out for a year and then you'll know. And I did, and yeah, it just all of a sudden, without trying, I had new friends, I had a job, I was doing everything that I was doing back home, just in a new life, in a new setting.
I came over like chronically underprepared. Had a great place for about a week, and then a psycho flatmate just kicked the rest of us out, so we were basically homeless. And then I heard from the university the scholarship I thought I had I didn't have, and so I kind of had no source of income. So there was a solid month and a half when I was kind of panic hunting for jobs and houses and just everything. Just because there was no safety net or anything, it was really, really scary, like far scarier than it would have been back home. You know that back home, if you hurt yourself or if you're off sick, whatever, the HCC's kind of got your back a little bit. Whereas over here, that isn't the case. You get sick, you lose your job, you don't have a family here to support you, and you don't have social welfare to rely on, so you're kind of buggered.
Yeah, I consistently run through like scenarios in my head about what if this were to happen, what would I do, what would it actually take for me to consider moving back home again, and all these things. And that is stuff I definitely would not have thought of if we did have the same sort of safety net.
I travelled a bit before I came to Australia, so I kind of had prepared myself mentally for a kind of culture shock when I got here. But it's just so similar, so very, very similar.
If you want a huge change culturally, Australia is not something that's really going to offer you that.
It's the little things that I find remind me that I'm in Sydney rather than home.
Like how they don't let you put a coffee on your EFTPOS card.
Because they always have minimum.
When the Prime Minister declares war on a country, that's a bit different.
I didn't think that would spend so much time in a day going on transport. Like to go and visit a friend, it could require you to catch a bus to a train station, to then jump on a bus and then you walk to their house.
Back in New Zealand, if you were doing that, you'd be living somewhere way out, you know, where no one really kind of wants to live.
And their food's not very nice.
And their advertising sucks. It's not funny at all.
I find Australians really value New Zealand as a country. They always are kind of quite happy to hear that there's a New Zealander living in Australia, sort of thing.
Which is strange because I never thought that it would be like that when we moved over here. I thought that it would be like, oh, your typical Kiwis.
My first job was actually at a wine shop, and there was this guy who was very, very Australian, like stereotypically so, had a Southern Cross tattoo on his forearm, and his nickname ended in an AZ, and he loved footy and stuff. And I thought, well, if anyone was going to take issue with me being Kiwi, it might be this guy. But no, he was actually really lovely and really welcoming and stuff, and just loved talking about the difference between rugby and AFL.
Which is interesting because when you come across an Australian living in New Zealand, we kind of take the piss out of them a lot. Whereas I find Australians have been a lot more accepting of us.
In saying that though, we're both white and young and male. I
Yeah.
think if you are Indian or someone of like Asian descent from New Zealand who came over here, you'd have a much harder time fitting in.
Yeah.
Like, they're slightly more racist.
It's quite common for people to refer to different ethnic groups with things that we would consider racial slang. Like Lebanese people are Lebos, and that seems to have a negative connotation to it. But even the Lebos call themselves Lebs or Lebos. So, I don't know. And like...
I think where that comes from though is that Australia has such a vast range of different cultures. We find especially in Sydney there's different pockets of different cultures in different parts of the city, which we're just not exposed to in New Zealand.
It's more like a fruit salad of ethnicities here rather than our just what is tin of peaches. Like you get used to the lifestyle that you have here. Like I get like a good wage. I have great shopping. It's big. It's exciting. There's something always happening.
It's always something new to do.
Pretty much why any young person moves is to get out of what you know and kind of take on something new. And I think just with New Zealand, it's such a great place to grow up, but it is very small. I think for now, in my early 20s, it's definitely home.
But also, it's not all like milk and honey. I mean, the grass is always greener, apart from when it's parched and dry and brown. So, I mean, life has been good to us. Can't complain.